Welcome again. We're so glad that you're here for our 2024 speaker series. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Clenita Graffenreid. I work at the University of Washington Smart Center. I am a training and technical assistance coordinator here, and I help lead our MHTTC Project Aware project at the UW Smart Center. But before we go further into our training today, definitely want to talk about our land acknowledgement. First and foremost, University of Washington Smart Center and Northwest MHTTC acknowledges that we live, learn, and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who walked here before us and those who still walk here. We're grateful to aim to respectfully live and work on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who call this home. We encourage you to learn about the ancestral lands you are joining us from. And what an important day to acknowledge our land acknowledgement on Indigenous Peoples Day. Today, we honor the sovereignty, resilience, and immense contributions that Native Americans have made to the world. There's several ways to celebrate, honor, or observe. You may consider learning more about the land that you live in, and I really want to encourage you. We're going to, I believe the PowerPoint is already posted, and if you've not had a chance to do it, you can download it when you can and click on that link and see the land that you are currently living on and search for events to attend in your area, supporting local Native businesses and accessing or sharing resources. So here are some resources on the screen that you can click on later to find out more about the land that you live on. So again, happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Okay, so this is kind of weird. I'm going to be introducing myself, but again, I'm Clenita Graffenreid, and I am a school psychologist by training. I'm a licensed psychologist. I live in Texas and work at the University of Washington Smart Center. I have been in education for, and it's official, I called our teacher retirement system about 2 months ago, and they told me in October, drum roll please, it'll be 26 years. 26 years that I've been in education. And so things have changed over the years. And one of the things that I'm so pleased to talk to you about is something that is evolving, and that's going to be school mental health and how we go about doing that. And so today's talk will be about school mental health through a multi-tiered systems framework. This presentation is part of a series, our speaker series 2024. And I want to make sure that when you guys download the PowerPoint, I want to direct you also to our website where you can learn more about our speaker series. So our theme for this year is promoting a positive school climate for student mental health, effective data, systems, and practices. And so we have invited national people who are going to come and talk about different areas related to school mental health. In November, we're going to hear from two of my colleagues and someone who's currently working in the district, and they're going to talk about comprehensive mental health, comprehensive universal screening, a statewide approach. So we know that when we do good mental health services in schools, we want to incorporate universal screenings. So if that's something that's really interesting to you, please join us on November 29th for our second speaker series. Then in January 17th, I'm so pleased to present my friend and colleague, Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims, who will be talking about fostering belonging and staff recruitment and retention. So we often talk about creating a positive school climate for our staff, for our students, but it's equally important that we do that for our staff as well. Dr. Nicole Holland-Sims will join us again in February to talk about becoming the journey of a change agent and how we as adults and staff members can help become a change agent. And March 20th, we will have Dr. Rhonda Neese, who will be talking about bullying prevention in elementary and middle schools. She's going to give us some foundational work, and she's going to set us all up to hear from our last speaker, Dr. Sarah McDaniels, who will talk about bullying prevention in elementary and middle and high school, leveraging experts in your building, and that will be April 17th. So we have 6 action-packed series as sessions as a part of our 2024 speaker series that is, again, going to highlight promoting positive school climates for student mental health, effective data, systems, and practices. All of this is brought to you by Northwest Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, also known as MHTTC, and the University of Washington School Mental Health Assessment Research and Training Center, or the UW Smart Center. So I've talked a little bit about the MHTTC, and the goals of the MHTTC network include accelerating, heightening, fostering, and most importantly, ensuring availability and delivery of publicly available and free of charge training and technical assistance. So our goal is to make sure that we heighten your awareness and knowledge and skills of the workforce as you guys are providing supports in the area of school mental health. And again, we have MHTTC network across the nation, and the University of Washington Smart Center, we provide services to Region 10 and these 4 states here. And a little bit about the UW Smart Center. UW Smart Center, we're a national leader in developing and supporting implementation of evidence-based practices in schools. So we focus on research and evaluation, training and technical assistance, and community partnering and outreach. I want to do a shout out to my UW Smart Center's operations team. You'll see their pictures that are displayed. And then I have 2 colleagues who are here, Mary Metter, who is one of our training team members, as well as Rayanne Silva. So thank you, ladies, for joining us today. And thank you, special shout out to operations, who are the wind beneath our wings and making all things run smoothly. If you need to reach out to us, you can reach out to us on all of our social media. Here's our website, our email address, Facebook. Oh, we don't have the bird anymore. He will always be known as the bird, but it is X. If you want to follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can do so here. And then again, here's our UW Smart Center email address, and you can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, the UW Smart Center. Okay, with no further ado, you guys ready to get in? We're going to get into this training because I want to make sure I set the foundation of the whole series, and that's about how we do school mental health services, how we do that in a multi-tiered systems of support framework. So today's session will provide participants with an overview of the Interconnected Systems Framework, or ISF, and how it supports the implementation of school mental health. Our objectives will be that participants will develop an understanding of ISF and the importance of a single system of delivery. I love starting trainings out with this quote from our Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, who says, in the past, students' access to structured mental health services in schools hasn't been implemented in a functional way. It's been ancillary and after the fact. We have the opportunity now to redesign schools and make sure that mental health services are a core part of a school's DNA. Now, I mentioned to you guys early on, I've been doing this since the Mississippi was a creek. I mean, it's been, like I said, at 26 years, I have given myself permission to say I've been doing this for nearly 30 years. I never thought I'd say that. But since we started providing services in schools from where we are now, things have changed. And we've got to keep up with that change, because what we've known that in the past, it wasn't in a very functional way. So let's look at that, where we've come from and where we are and the difference. So in the past, if you've been around, maybe not as long as I have, or even in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, our past practice, our way of thinking was that only certain kids needed to receive social, emotional, behavioral skills. Our current thinking is that mental health is for all. What's the difference? Mental health wellness is a protective factor and should be addressed with the same attention as academic skills. As a result, our social emotional skills should be taught by all staff in all settings and to all students. It's not just for a particular group of students. My background is in special education. As a school psychologist, that's where I spent most of my time. And the kids who really got the most mental health services were kids who were in special education. But now we know that every kid can benefit from being taught social emotional skills. And it's not just by the school psychologist or the school counselor. We are at this point saying that this is for all, and it needs to be embedded in everything that we do. Now, we used to think that school mental health programs have been only effective, we would consider them effective by how many kids were involved. So sometimes we would have to report, this is how many kids that we served. And that would be the indication of how good of a job we were doing. We saw X amount of students. What we know is that access is not enough. And as my colleague Susan Barrett would say, can you imagine an education if we measured how successful English, let's say freshman English in the high school was by the number of kids attending? That there's no way we can tell how effective our curriculum has been just by the kids who are attending. So what we know is that we have to look at more than just the number of people receiving services. We have to do progress monitoring. We have to look at fidelity of our interventions. And most importantly, we need to look at student outcome data to determine about how effective we are in providing mental health services in the schools. Last thing we want to talk about is that school mental health in the past was a standalone. It was something either we had the school psychologist doing for a certain group of kids, or if we did have an outside provider come in, they would come in and they would go and see the kid, and it would just be done in isolation. What we know is that in order to do this effectively, we have to do it in the context of MTSS. We want to use MTSS because of the core features of MTSS, which include integrated team processing, use of data. Yes, data. We need data. Why? If you are MTSSer or PBISer, say it with me. We use data because data drives our decision making. Another core feature of MTSS is that we have a formal process for selecting our EBPs. How are we going to determine what interventions we're going to use? Well, using MTSS like PBIS gives us a way in determining what interventions we're going to use. By using MTSS, we're going to do things like comprehensive screenings. We're going to capitalize on early identification. And most importantly, we're going to look at treatment fidelity and intervention fidelity. All of that is going to be encompassed within professional development so that we can make sure that we have trained and provided training to staff, so that is one good way to support our staff and building systems so that our staff can turn around and provide evidence-based practices for students. So as you can see, where we were to where we're going to has definitely changed. I wish I could interact with you a little bit more because I can't see my comments, but that's very different than what we used to do in the past. And so we're going to continue to evolve because we want to make sure that we are providing the very best services for all kids on a campus. So let's talk about the evolution of our student support frameworks. Now, if you remember, this all started with academics, RTI. And through RTI, that's where we were focused on identifying students' strengths and needs in terms of academics. Yes, we use evidence-based curriculum. There's an explicit instruction. We were providing services to kids based on their needs. And there were teams that would meet to determine what kind of support children needed. So we first started with RTI. And then we came over and realized, you know what? We need to provide services to the whole child, not just the academic part of them. We now need to look at social, emotional, behavioral needs of students. And in comes positive behavior interventions and supports. Now, I want you to see how they complement each other. In PBIS, we are looking at behavioral skills. Yes, we're using evidence-based curriculum. We are still using explicit instruction, but as a way to prevent issues. We're increasing our intensity of supports, just like through RTI, through that multi-tiered system. And we are doing all this in the confines of a team. And this team is making database decisions about how and what to implement for students. So we started off first with RTI, then we came with PBIS. And through that system of looking at academics and behavior together, what do we get? That's where we get our multi-tiered systems of support. So again, So again, MTSS is going to do all of those things. We're going to look at strengths and needs in terms of academics and behavior at the same time. We're going to use explicit instruction again for prevention. We're going to tier our supports to children based on their needs. And we're going to do this in the context of a team that's going to use data to drive our decisions about how we intervene. So we started started with RTI, looking at academics. Then we evolved and incorporated PBIS to now look at the social emotional behavior components of a child. Then all of that came together under the umbrella of MTSS. So where are we now? We have our PBIS and everything that we just talked about, all those things. And then we have school mental health. So how is that different than PBIS? Glad you asked. In school mental health, we're going to now uncover strengths and needs in terms of mental health skills. We're going to always use evidence-based curriculum. Why? Because the federal law requires us to do evidence-based interventions, which includes the curriculum. We're going to continue to use explicit instruction, and because we know that wellness is a skill tool. We're going to use our multi-tier system support to know how to provide services, what type of services, and the intensity to our children. Now, just like we did in RTI and PBIS, we're going to do things in the context of a team. But under school mental health, we are expanding our team to include youth. We're going to capture youth voice, family voice, and clinicians. Not just our clinicians in the schools, but we're going to invite outside clinicians into our schools to make sure that we are providing supports in that multi-tiered system to the students on the campus. So we've evolved from academics to academics into behavior to behavior, social, emotional learning, into school mental health. And that is where we get the interconnected systems framework. So when we combine how we provide supports through MTSS and PBIS and school mental health, that's where we get interconnected systems framework. So we have the single system delivery, where we are looking at RTI for the academics, PBIS is looking at social emotional behavior, school mental health is looking at mental health skills, and the difference is that we're doing it through one single system of delivery. We're not handing off the way we used to, where we'd have the RTI team meet, and then they realize, oh, this is behavior issue, and they kick it to the PBIS team. And then after that, the PBIS team would say, oh, it's really behavior, but there's really some underlying mental health issues. So now we have one single system of delivery, and that is what Interconnected Systems Framework does. So the core features of ISF, and Susan Barrett would say ISF is just PBIS 2.0. Core features, again, we're still going to use our effective teams. All of this is going to be based not by one person's decision. It's going to be done in the context of a team. This team is going to use data-based decisions. Now, the difference is that we're not just looking at school data, we're going to incorporate community data, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We're still going to talk about formal processes for selecting and implementing evidence-based practices. How do we determine what intervention we might use at Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3? As always, we are going to make sure that children are getting early access to services through the use of comprehensive screening, because that's where we're going to be able to identify kids who have internalizing issues as well as kids who have externalizing needs. As always, we always are going to make sure that we are progress monitoring so that we can check for fidelity and the effectiveness of our interventions, regardless. So it doesn't matter what intervention you're doing. If it's not working, then what would the team need to do? We need to stop and reevaluate, because we want to make sure that we are doing what we said we were going to do, and we are looking at student outcome data to determine whether or not it's making a difference for that student. And lastly, we want to make sure that we have ongoing coaching, because the coaching is going to be at the systems level as well as looking at practices. So we're going to provide support to staff through ongoing coaching, looking at, again, systems, how we're doing things, and then the what, and that would be our practices. So the big idea, when I first started as a school psychologist back in the 1990s, let's see, when did I start? No, I'm sorry, it was 1998-ish. When I started, we were working in a siloed model. Let's just say in schools, we had SPED doing its own thing, Jeanette here. We really didn't ever talk. Now we're moving away from a co-located, we're in the same building. We're providing services, but now we're going from co-located to the interconnected systems framework, which is a fully integrated system. Okay, so we've evolved from using RTI, PBIS, school mental health, to now we are at ISF, Integrated Systems Framework, or PBIS 2.0, as Susan Barrett might say. And through this single operating system that's for all kids, these are the things that we're going to focus on. Let me get them all up here. We're going to organize our resources. We're going to convene in teams. And that team is going to look in, for those of you who've done PBIS in the past, one of the things that we first start with is we do resource mapping. What do we have? What services do we currently have? What do we need? So we're going to organize our resources to see where we're starting from. And we're going to do that so that we can make sure that kids get help early. We're going to provide universal screenings and progress monitoring so we can make sure if there are some kids whose needs continue to rise up, that we get to them quickly. We're going to do things that work, which means that we are going to do what the federal law says. We're going to do evidence-based practices. And those are practices that we know the research says, if you do them to fidelity, you should get improved student outcomes. We're going to provide supports to our staff. We're going to support staff so that they implement the interventions with fidelity. And as a school psychologist, I've always said, I'm not the interventionist. Who is the interventionist on that campus typically? It's the teachers. So day to day, we want to make sure that the interventionists, also known as teachers, that they are implementing those practices with fidelity. And we're going to provide support for them to make sure that they can do that. We're going to invest in staff so they can support all students. We want to provide a culture of wellness, and not just a positive culture for our students, but one that everybody on the campus and the building feels good about. We're going to make sure that we provide training and coaching supports to staff so that they can feel supported and well as they intervene. We're going to focus on whole school supports. We're going to make sure that we're implementing well. We're going to look at the fidelity of what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing this in a continuous improvement cycle where we adjust, plan, do, study, and act, and keep going and look, making sure that our data drives what we do. So in using an interconnected approach, NTS becomes a community effort. It's not just something that school is doing. We're doing it as a part of the community, and we're inviting the community in so that we can make sure that there's a complete focus on meeting the needs of all of the students on the campus. Now, we've talked about PBIS, and I'm a PBISer for sure. And as a school psychologist, I value school mental health, obviously. But let's talk about addressing some of the limitations. PBIS, while it has a strong focus and a strong, solid foundation at Tier 1, what we found is that schools continue to struggle in implementing Tier 2 and Tier 3. So sometimes we would find schools doing a bang-up job at Tier 1, and then they would skip to Tier 3. What's the problem with going from 1 to 3? Some kids, if we provide great services at Tier 2, may not need additional services at Tier 3. And those kids, when we don't do Tier 2, we don't know if it's that they really need Tier 3, that their needs have risen to that point, or that we failed to provide at Tier 1. So that's one of the things of the limitations of PBIS, is that sometimes we wouldn't be, that campuses continue to struggle with implementing Tier 2 and Tier 3 to fidelity. The second thing is that many systems have challenges aligning So how do we align all these initiatives? We got a bullying initiative. We have mental health initiatives. How do we do that so that it all flows together and it flows so that it makes sense? Another limitation was that the kids who behaviors were externalizing, they got our attention. Unfortunately, youth with internalizing issues sometimes went undetected. So we needed to do a better job of making sure that we provided supports for all kids in needs, not just those kids whose behaviors were externalizing. And another limitation is that didn't have enough staff and resources. And when we look at where we are in 2023, going into 2024, we know that there is a strain on our staff and resources. And again, although there have been success with efforts to improve school climate and discipline, what we realize is that we need more community data and mental health prevention. They weren't always there. So when I talk about community data, what we're talking about is what's going on. What are our community mental health providers? What type of issues are they seeing in their clinics? And would it be important for us to know that with that data and drive things that we would do in the schools? So while our point of practice might be different, sometimes we're serving the same children. Oftentimes we're serving the same children. So because of those limitations, we realize there's a need for an interconnected systems framework because schools just can't do it alone. One, we know our resources and our staff are limited. So we still have schools across the nation that are still looking for qualified staff. That's really important, particularly as we talk about children who are receiving services through special education, who may not be getting services because we don't have enough personnel, but also for the students who may not be in special education, whose needs may not be met because we have a shortage in our staff members. So as a result, we realize we have a need for community partners to be integrated into our school teams. So what does that look like? And how do we integrate our community partners, our outside social workers, outside psychologists? How do we partner with them and bring them in to make sure that we have created a system that will meet the needs of all of our students? Well, we've got to think about funding and support so that our outside providers can function at not just tier 3, because oftentimes we would bring them in for those kids with the greatest needs, but we want to bring in our community partners and we want to focus and use their expertise where? At tier 1, 2. Quickly, someone tell me, why would we want to bring an outside partner, an outside mental health partner to come and sit on a tier 1 team? My team, can you have folks, guys, if you will raise your hand and one of them will unmute you or put it in the chat, or I guess just raise your hand and they'll unmute you. Why do we want to have an outside mental health person partner with us, not just at tier 3, but at tier 1? What would be the value?
To help strengthen for preventative measures, strengthen our tier 1.
Yes. Lindsay, this is when you need to have your virtual tip jar so I can reinforce you virtually. Yes. At tier 1, what is the purpose of tier 1? It's to prevent. So in addition to using Dr. So-and-so, who has a knowledge base in some area, in addition to using their services at tier 3, Lindsay, what you're saying is that we can have them use their expertise to prevent. Is that right?
Yes. Sorry,
Yes.
They were unmuting me. Yes.
I know, I'm
yes.
sorry. Right.
Yeah, so just like how we would strengthen our academic, but we can do the same thing with the mental health side of it. Rather than like putting out fires all the time.
Yes.
If we help to live in the prevention world, then we're not going to live in tier 3 as often.
Yes. And so we want to tap into their expertise to respond when there are issues, but most importantly, we want to use their expertise to prevent it. So say we have an outside mental health person who has specialty and expertise in suicide prevention. That can be a value as we do a school-wide intervention or prevention on suicide prevention by using that outside mental health providers' expertise and knowledge as to how to set up a school-wide program. Absolutely. Thank you, Lindsay. I think I had one more.
No, I was just going to add that same idea as prevention, but to make sure they don't get to having that need at tier 3. If we can get them during tier 1, then we don't get that. It doesn't escalate.
Absolutely. So I can use my community partners at tier 3, but I can use them at tier 1 to make sure that we provide as many supports for those kids. As we know, at tier 1, 80 to 90% of those kids should respond to that intervention. So I'm going to bring in my outside partners to help develop a school-wide program to prevent issues, so that we're not only relying on their expertise, and as Lindsay said, as we're reacting to when there are issues, but now we're using them at the front end to prevent. When we do that, we're going to make sure that we develop MOUs. And what are MOUs? Just a document that says, okay, this is what the school is going to do, and this is what you're going to do, and this is how we're going to work together. So it's not just a handoff. It is we're working together. We're not just calling in Dr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so to come and provide services to hand it off. We're absolutely working together in a team, and we're using data to make sure that to drive all of the decisions we make at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Thank you, Laurel, and thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to go to Q&A. Oh, okay. Monica, I'll definitely going to get your question. What does a tier 1 mental health curriculum look like? Okay, so now we have a sense of what this integrated systems framework looks like. It looks a lot like what we did at PBIS. What interconnected systems framework is, we're looking at, through MTSS, we're looking at everything. When we're looking at social emotional behavioral issues, as well as school mental health issues or wellness, and the emphasis is about bringing in the community partners, not just so we can hand off at tier 3, but inviting the community partners to work with us at each tier, with the emphasis on prevention at tier 1. Okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that. Okay, so we know that when we do PBIS, you guys, if you've done PBIS, you've heard about it, you know that when you do it, all the outcomes that you can expect to happen when you do it to Fidelity. And in 2023, I can look and see, oh my gosh, how many of these do we really need right now? I am really concerned about this, teacher efficacy and well-being. I think that when you have using MTSS or PBIS, part of what we do, one of the elements of PBIS is systems. And systems are designed to what? They're designed to help support our staff. And so when we're such a great teacher shortage right now and staff shortage, I think, wow, this is something that I think we really need to hone in on, is teacher efficacy and well-being, to make sure our interventionists are doing well. I would click that. Climate and safety. My children's school district has just approved that they're, and well, actually say, not just my children's school district, but in my state, every LEA has to have a armed SRO on each campus. And so there is such an emphasis on climate and safety. It's questionable about whether or not that makes you feel safe or not. But what we do know for sure is that PBIS, when done to Fidelity, will impact climate and safety of all folks involved, not just our kids. So certainly we want to make sure we reduce exclusionary discipline. The harms of exclusionary discipline is when a child is excluded, has been assigned an exclusionary discipline practice. Where are they not? They're not in the classroom receiving instruction. So we know that exclusionary discipline is associated with dropout and involvement in the juvenile system. So we definitely want to make sure that we're addressing that. And we know that when PBS is done to Fidelity, we can expect that these things can go down. And then certainly when doing PBS to Fidelity, these are all the things that we know can happen. Pro-social behavior increases, academic achievement, emotional regulation, reduced bullying behaviors. So when done to Fidelity, these are the outcomes that research continues to show us will happen when we do it to Fidelity. So what are the ways that we're expanding PBIS? Again, we talked about this earlier, we're expanding the way we do business in PBIS in incorporating school mental health, is that our teams are going to include youth voice, family and community mental health providers. Again, we are going to be expanding opportunity and access for members who have been historically excluded. So we want parents on our teams, we want the outside providers, and we want a student's voice, because that is so important and can inform us in ways that we might not have originally thought. We're expanding by making sure our database decision-making includes school data beyond ODRs and community data. I often share when one of my children says they're not feeling well, the first place I call, after I find out they're not feeling well, say they wake up in the morning and one of them reports having a sore throat or any kind of ailment. As soon as 8 o'clock hits, I'm calling the school nurse. Why would I call the school nurse before I call the pediatrician? You know why? I call the school nurse because I'm trying to get the school nurse has a sense of what's going on in the community of the school. What's going on? What is she seeing? What is he or she seeing? That gives me a greater sense that when I call the pediatrician, I've collected some community data as a mom and saying, oh, the school nurse says that she has seen lots of cases of strep. My kid's reporting having a sore throat. I just want to let you know, what should I bring him in? So that's my way of looking at community data. But as a school team, we're going to look at ODRs, office discipline referrals, and then we're going to go outside and say, mental health provider, what are you seeing in the communities? What are the things what are you helping kids work on? What are some of the issues that kids are having? Because that can inform us in terms of the programming and interventions we put in place at the school level. And then again, we're expanding because we are now going to include formal processes for the selection and implementation of our evidence-based practices. Excuse me. And again, we want to make sure that our EVPs are customized to fit the culture, context, and needs of our communities. Because just because an intervention is evidence-based, maybe it's not the right fit for the population that we're serving. So we want to be very clear about what evidence-based practices we're going to use to make sure that they are culturally responsive to the kids that we're serving. Again, we've talked about this before. We're expanding by using comprehensive screeners, universal screeners that will help us uncover strengths and the internalizing and externalizing needs of our students. And again, just another reminder, next month, we're going to have my colleagues Rayanne Silva and Mary Metter and a district exemplar to talk about the use of universal screeners through the Washington approach. So the state of Washington has a way in which they want folks in Washington to use screeners. So I encourage you to come in November to hear about the use of universal screeners. And again, we are expanding because we're looking at fidelity and effectiveness of interventions, regardless of who delivers them. So in the past, when we had our mental health provider come into the campus and we'd hand it off, we really never looked at fidelity there. We just knew that so-and-so was being seen by this outside person. We didn't look at how effective the intervention was. We really weren't looking at student outcome data, but now we are going to be looking at fidelity and effectiveness for everybody on that team, including the outside mental health provider. And again, we're going to do ongoing coaching and supports for our staff because that's part of our systems. And that's also will help us to identify and examine the health of our system for those, again, for the interventionists who are providing the interventions to students. So again, here we go. We're comparing how our traditional school mental health ways of doing things to the interconnected system framework. So traditionally, each school has their own plan with a mental health or outside agency, outside service agency. Through interconnected systems framework, we are going to have an integrated plan where there is a plan developed at the district level about how we're going to integrate mental health, and it's going to be based on school and community data. We're no longer going to have a clinician placed in the school for a few days and they're going to provide services just for a few kids. These outside mental health providers are going to come into the schools, and we're going to ask them to sit on all of our teams in the building, and we're going to incorporate what they do into tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. The past school personnel would work in isolation and they would do mental health over there. Mental health is now a part of what we do as a team. And that team, again, consists of school providers as well as our community providers who work together collaboratively. And again, in the past, we really weren't focused on data. We really measured our effectiveness by who accessed our services. Now we're looking from access to outcomes. Are these children improving? Does the student outcome data, is it moving? Are students getting better because of the interventions? So for some of you, you're thinking, wow, this is a lot. How in the world would we do this? So glad you asked, because you don't have to make this up. The the Advancing Education Effectiveness, Interconnecting School Mental Health, and School-Wide PBS, all the moves have been scripted for you. So in this guide, which we have right here, here's a QR code, everything is scripted for you. Where chapter 1 focuses on context and structure for volume. Chapter 2, defining ISF, its origins, critical features, and key messages. Chapter 3, exploration and adoption. Chapter 4, installing ISF at the district and school and community level. Chapter 5, installing ISF at the building level. Chapter 6, full implementation and sustainability. So there's a guide with things that will walk you through how you can do this at your district and community level. And with that, I want to thank you for spending your lunch with us today, your mid-morning break with us, and coming to learn about how to implement school mental health services through a multi-tiered system of support. Again, want to remind you, this is part 1 of a 6-part series that's going to walk us through promoting positive school climate for school mental health, effective data systems and practices. Again, put on your calendar these dates, and you can get this when you download the PowerPoint. November 29th, we're going to be looking at comprehensive universal screening, a statewide approach. January 17th, so we're going to take off the month of December. We'll come back and hit fostering belonging and staff recruitment and retention with Dr. Nicole Holland Sims. She will come back in the month of February 8th, to talk about becoming the journey of a change agent. So January and February is going to really talk about how do we support staff. And this is important as we are faced with a reduction in our staff and as we try to recruit staff to come into the schools. In March, again, we're going to have Dr. Rhonda Neese talk to us about bullying at the elementary and middle school. She's going to give us a foundation. And then in April, our last session will be with Dr. Sarah McDaniel, who will again talk about bullying prevention. Let me go back. I said Dr. Rhonda Neese is going to talk about bullying. She's going to talk about bullying prevention as well as Dr. Sarah McDaniel in April. And again, all of this is brought to you through Northwest MHTTC and the UW Smart Center. Okay, there we go. Our upcoming folks. I do want to let you know that this is a SAMHSA sponsored event. However, that does not mean that they will officially have any official position on this content. This is our little disclaimer. And again, here is all the ways that you can contact us. It'll be in the PowerPoint that you will have access to. It's already on the website, so you can go right now and download the PowerPoint and you can contact us. So, team, is it time for my favorite part, Q&A?
Oh, okay.
Hi, how are you?
I wanted to appreciate you really, because I've been on many webinars and I rarely get that amount of energy and just a willingness to reach out and to connect in the way that you have. And I really appreciate your presentation and sincerely. So
Thank you so
I
much.
know you've been trying to reach out as best as you can, and but just to let you know, there's somebody here in Portland, Oregon, actually Washington. I'm sorry, not Portland. I used to be in Portland, in Washington, in a rural area, listening to you and very intently and wanting to do a good job here as a mental health therapist in a school.
Thank you, Bernice. I received that so much. I appreciate it. And you let us know how we can support you through the University of Washington's Wright Center and MHTTC. Thanks
Definitely
so
will
much.
be paying attention. Thank you so much for your dedication.
Thank you. Okay, I see.
Clarnita,
Yes.
there are a couple of questions in the Q&A if you want me to
Yes.
ask those for you.
I actually, now I can pull them up. Thank you.
Okay.
What does a Tier 1 mental health curricula look like? Are there any recommendations? Great question. And I'm going to also say, Mary, you can chime in with this. When I think about what does a Tier 1 mental health curriculum look like, that looks like what you would do with your PBIS curriculum. And it also looks like what you would do to incorporate your social emotional learning. I know that my colleague Rayanne Silva is on the line, and Rayanne does a wonderful job at one of her areas of expertise is SEL. Rayanne or Mary, would you like to contribute to that question? I know I'm putting Rayanne right on the spot if she's here with us.
Well, for me, I would say that instead of jumping straight to a curriculum, to really focus on those systems level things that you had talked about, Clarnita, because otherwise, something like a curriculum or intervention, right? That's not going to be successful without the system level teaming, the integration of your mental health community and supports within your team structures. And so using those resources that you had shared earlier and starting with that to kind of see what you already have in place before adding something new, and kind of checking, doing a resource mapping of what you already have and how well it's being implemented before you add anything new.
Thank you, Mary. And Rayanne.
I actually think Mary said it perfectly. So I don't have anything to add to that, but
thank you. So in summary, what my colleagues are saying is, yes, we want to look at the curriculum, but before we get to the curriculum, we want to make sure that we have systems in place. Because what happens when we just focus on practices, when we don't have the system in place that will support our staff, then we kind of get things a little bit out of order. So when you are doing all those fundamental things, like looking at what you already have in place, resource mapping, do we have a system of teams put in place so that we can usually look at our data to kind of figure out what's important, what are the needs of our kids on this campus, and let that data kind of drive what we do from there. Thank you, Monica. Second question. Does this need to be integrated starting at a district level? Oh, for it to be successful at a school building level. I'm a little biased here. I think that for success, what we do know in education is that it is a top down. So when you have your district supporting this, what we know through implementation science is that the district, when we have a district team involved, that district teams, one of their purpose of the district team is to identify barriers that the campus might experience and provide access to what the campus needs. So when you have the district involved, the district can identify what are some things. And I want to ask for everybody, one of the major stumbling blocks sometimes in terms of doing this work could be, say a campus wants to do MTSS or PBIS, and they need training. Who's going to provide the training? Who's going to provide substitutes for the training? Who's going to provide the time for the staff to get trained? When you have the district involved, the district can identify some of those barriers. Kind of like anyone familiar with Universal Design for Learning, we know there are going to be some barriers there. When you have a district team that's a part of it, the district team can identify those barriers and provide access. So the district team might write in days into their professional development schedule for campuses to get trained. So I would say definitely it would be a benefit to have your district team involved for it to be successful at a campus level. Okay. Okay, so Mary's typing to answer. And then Deb says, it's challenging to get teachers on board to presenting curriculum. Everyone wants the counselors to teach it. Yes, that is very challenging. And I think that's where, Deb, we talked about in the past that we saw mental health as being maybe the school psychologist, that was their main thing, or the school counselor. But now we realize mental health is everybody's job to do. And so I think what we need to do is sometimes is to let teachers know that we need their support. There's just no way in the world that one individual can do it all. And so it is about moving out of siloed approaches. And I think also letting teachers know we're not expecting you to be licensed mental health providers, but there are things that you can do inside the classroom to help support it. So I think maybe dispelling some of the myths or concerns that teachers have, that it is very challenging when we are trying to get to an integrated approach and moving away from what we used to do, which was a lot of siloed work. But I definitely agree, Deb, that is hard. And Mary, that question disappeared. I think that Mary got that last question.
Oh, yes, sorry, I answered it by typing it. Someone had
Okay.
recommended a curriculum that they're using. And so I think it's important that a district, before identifying a curriculum based off of what someone else is using, to really identify what mental wellness would look like for their district, and to use data to help determine what is our need before selecting a specific curriculum, which I'm sure is what that district who shared out would be. But before we go to straight to what curriculum are we using or what curriculum can we buy, as a community, we really need to focus on what is our data telling us is our need? What do we need to search for in terms of a solution, right? But before we can just buy a curriculum, we want to just make sure we identify the need by using our data.
Yes. And on that note, Mary, I'm going to jump in and say, yeah, because I can't not say it. Data drives our decision making, and that's about what do we need to do. But we also need to make sure that if we're going to purchase a curriculum, we need to make sure that the data supports that it's evidence-based. So you might have lots of commercial programs out there that are popular, but may not be evidence-based. So we need to look at the data to make sure that that guides us also to making sure that we are using evidence-based programs and interventions, and we're installing them at our school. That, again, the emphasis is on making sure that they're evidence-based. All right, guys, thank you so much. I appreciate you all again here, wishing you guys a wonderful rest of your week from the UW Smart Center and Northwest MHTTC. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, guys.